Hey, welcome to Gold Scratch. So this video is about how you can build a nice street high performance engine on a budget. And that's one of my favorite subjects and one of the YouTube's most favorite subjects, because for most guys out there watching videos like this, it's probably the most practical thing to do. And there's always more to know. I have made videos about it before, and there's always more. And I got an opportunity. I wasn't planning this one. I'll explain how I kind of backed into it. And we decided to make another budget build and a series of budget build videos. So, and for those from my era, I mentioned I bought Bill Jenkins' book back from Bill Little, my good buddy Bill Little. I paid Bill a lot of money for this book, so I got to make sure I read it. I've started, and I'm going to give you a few anecdotes, maybe in each video. And for guys in my era that struggle with building engines on GM parts and all that stuff, I think you're going to enjoy some of the points I'm going to make with it. So we'll come back to that at the end. So this block, there's really two most sought after blocks to start with. And you got to do your homework and you got to do your research. The most popular is the 880 roller block from 1995 in that era. And there's only a few years where the roller block came with the fuel pump, place to put your fuel pump. And unless you want to run your engine with electric fuel pump, you pretty well got to have that. So they're pretty rare, but they are roller blocks. They're good quality blocks. The casting technology is a lot newer than the older blocks and sought after. So if you get a hold of an 880 block, buy it. And if you don't want to use it, give me a call. I'll buy it back from you. So they are definitely ideal. You also can use the GM roller lifters in it, which are a lot less expensive than link bar lifters, aftermarket link bar lifters, retrofit link bar lifters. So if you get one of those guys, I still haven't built one because I haven't found one that suited my needs so far. The next best is the 1969 to 1979 0010 block, 4-bolt main block, and I have one right here in front of me, and that's what inspired me to do this and make this video. So I'm always looking for cores, and when I heard that there was a 4-bolt main 0010 block, this block, by the way, 69 to 79, could have been in a Z28, could have been in a Corvette. They were used in high performance, and they were used in trucks during those era. This one actually was in the truck. But when I heard there was one for sale, I bought it sight unseen and took a chance on it, because they're getting harder and harder to find, and especially if it's a 4-bolt main block. So that inspired me to do another budget build. And I've just explained to you, what the heck does a budget build mean anyways? So first of all, it means that you don't take it to a machine shop, or you sure try not to, and not knocking machine shops. These guys do critical, important work that no one else can do. A lot of times we can't do for ourselves, and they're just trying to make a living like everybody else. But the work's just necessarily expensive. And once you get started, if you get into board and you got to hot tank it and you got to magnaflux it and all that stuff, it gets expensive and cost prohibitive to do that. So in this case, this block was a real surprise. As I said, I bought it sight unseen, and to my surprise, the crankshaft was standard, the bore was standard. It's never been built before. The crankshaft is not only standard, it doesn't need to be turned, because typically on a build, you send it to the machine shop, you bore the block, sometimes you deck it, and then you turn the crankshaft 10 thou, 20 thou, maybe even 30 thou sometimes. And it's not a bad thing to do that, but if you don't have to, it's even better. But there's an example of one of the bearings out of this block. This, I don't know how many miles it had on it, but I could actually reuse the bearings in this block. It's that nice. Or in this engine, they're that nice. I cleaned the crankshaft up, and I'll show you some cleaning tips after. And really no need to do any machining work whatsoever. I'm replacing the bearings with CHEVY 77 bearings I got from Bill Little. I honed it myself. I put a 220 starting hone and 400 grit final hone with not a dingleberry hone or whatever they're called, standard type of hone. I got a nice smooth finish. These rings are Seal Power E251K, which are chrome ring. So you need a pretty smooth finish because it's a chrome ring. So we're just getting ready. One of the things is that you have to take care of, and you have to be able to manage that, is cleaning it. So if you're going to clean it, you got to get all the cores out of it, all the oil plugs out of it, nothing obstructing your cleaning job. And in my case, the preferred way, I have a good high pressure gas powered power washer, and that and a whole bunch of elbow grease and a lot of scrubbing and wire brushing and emery cloth and a whole bunch of other things, and you got yourself a clean block. Took me pretty much an entire day just to clean this block. A couple other tips for cleaning I'll show you. One of the things that you have to do is there's 3 oil galleys. I've got them plugged now, so I can't do that. But these oil galleys go from the front to the back of the block. So I just use a piece of old brake line, and you put an air hose in one end, and you can actually extend that brake line right through one end of the block to the other to be sure. Then I turn around and run it from the back side again. And then I take my high pressure washer and inject water into here as well to make sure I got a good flow. And basically the same kind of logic with every orifice in the block. We also use, I'm searching around here, Moroso brush kit. This is the little baby one that actually goes in the crankshaft journals. It'll actually fit into the crankshaft journals, and you can actually shove that right through from one side to the other and make sure they're clean. And I also have one that's about 4.5 inches for washing the cylinder bores. So cleanliness is, as they say, next to godliness when it comes to engines. It's a lot nicer if you could take it to a machine shop and have them hot tank it, but in this case I didn't do that. But you can get them clean. It is a lot of work, but it's absolutely essential. So unfortunately, we are kind of in progress already. When Mike stopped by, I've already put the cam bearings in this block. This is just a test cam that I use for whenever I put bearings in, just to make sure the cam bearings fit nice. And that's been done. The hone's in the block. I've done that. It's ready to go. I've measured up the piston clearances, and so there's a little bit of wear in the block. The standard piston clearance when this block was new, according to GM, is 0.015 to 0.025. In other words, 1.5 to 2.5 thou. And there's right now on average just over 3 thousandths of an inch. So 3 to 3.5 thousandths of an inch. So about 1,000ths of an inch wear. So that's not the end of the world. And with a good hone job, chrome rings take a little longer to break in, but in the long run, they'll do a good job for me. And so minimal wear. But as for the crankshaft, absolutely the crankshaft might right on spec. And I've already, when Mike got here, I just measured the clearance on one connecting rod bearing. It's got 2 thousandths of an inch clearance with standard bearings, CHEVY 77 bearings, as I mentioned. I don't have the main bearings yet. I do have the crankshaft laying down, so don't get mad. Normally it's standing up. Normally I check the rod bearings when the crankshaft's in the engine, but I can't put it in because I don't have main bearings yet. So that's why it's down there, so I can get at it with my, my micrometers and my Edelbrock gauge and all that. I will stand it right back up as soon as I've done that. So there's a few things in preparation. Of course, you have to knock all the frost plugs out of it so you can get a good cleaning, good power washing inside the block as well. I haven't put the frost plugs back in. All the oil plugs, here's one. Yeah, I'll show you quickly that you have to make sure you don't forget is this little guy here, because once your cylinder head's on, you don't get another chance to do that. There's 2 or 3 others in the engine that have to be done. So they are already drilled and tapped. So I'll note one thing. This is interesting. I've never done it this way. As you can see, I've drilled and tapped and put pipe plugs. This is 1/4 inch pipe plug. So you just tap it with a 1/4 inch pipe tap. And that is just the GM plug. Now, I'm going to get to the Jenkins book in a minute, but one of the things he mentions in block preparation, he never saw a point of drilling and tapping, or tapping and threading for pipe plugs. They just use the factory pressed in plugs, and we peen them over, and he's never had a problem. On the other hand, I've always done it that way. In this case, as you can see, I did do that with this galley here. Feeds the lifter bores, feeds the lifters on the left side, this side, and this galley feeds the lifters on this side. And this one is your main oil galley, goes down to your cam bearings, around your cam bearings, into your crankshaft bearing. That's your main oil feed for the whole, your camshaft and your main bearings, okay? And your main bearings feed your rod bearings. So basically the whole engine. The problem with this one is the way this one was drilled. By the time I got my tap in there, if I would have tapped it, it would have been so deep that I would be blocking off. There's a little passage that goes down right at the front, goes to the front camshaft bearing and then the front main bearing, and it would have blocked that off. So in this case, I did use the pressed in plug. You can get away with tapping them and putting a plug in. Be careful. And you always want to do an oil test to make sure the oil is getting to your cam bearings and getting to your crankshaft after you do that, because if you block that guy off, you're going to lose your front main bearing, and that's not going to be fun. So another little tip, hopefully you find that helpful. So we're getting ready to go here. What I've got done so far, once again, the cylinder bores are ready to go. I like the pattern that I have in them. It's fairly smooth. It's a 400 grit pattern for chrome rings, and I think that's going to be sufficient. The main bearings I haven't measured up yet, but I know the crankshaft's got no wear in it whatsoever, so I'm not worried about that. Rod bearings, I've only done one. So what's going to happen after this? So here's the plan. We're going to use the stock pistons. This is a budget build, so we're using the stock pistons. And so it's not going to be a high compression engine. We're going to use 64 cc's. We're going to use another set of ProMaxx 64 cc 185 runner, intake runner cylinder heads, aluminum cylinder heads. We used them before. They work pretty nice. So with that, because I think we just calculated the volume was about 14 cc's, I think. And so that gives us just over 9.1 to 1 compression ratio. So not a high compression engine in this case. It's a budget build. And the good news, you could probably run this thing on 87 fuel with absolutely no issues whatsoever. So that's the plan. And here's another example of the condition of this engine. This is the piston that I took out of it. There's absolutely no indication that it's even been in an engine. Usually you see a little bit of vertical scuffing on the piston that's got into use, and they're all like that. There's absolutely no indication of anywhere. So before I go too far, get in there, please like and subscribe. Still only a small percentage of viewers that are watching this video are subscribers. And even if half of you guys decided, and girls, decided to subscribe, it would make a huge difference. One of the reasons this engine is kind of in progress, and I would have liked to make a video about every step along the way, but you know, we're trying to balance making videos and getting work done, and we got commitments and stuff that's got to get out of here, so sometimes we just don't have the opportunity. Basically, what I approached this one was, if I can do the work myself and avoid that, I can spend more money on buying good parts and building a better motor. So I took this block apart. At the most, there's 1/1000th of an inch wear in the cylinder walls, and the crank was absolutely on spec. I replaced the bearings with standard bearings, and they're perfect, and the bearing clearances are right in the money, 2.5 thou. plus or minus. So pretty rare that you can do that. And so that's why when it became a subject of a budget build versus a machine shop build. So all the things I described, hot tanking, jet washing, magnaflexing, machine honing, sometimes decking, sometimes line boring is necessary, not usually, very seldom you need to do that, but it can run up the cost. So I didn't have to do that because everything was just in great shape, and the bearings on it, we have some here. I kept them to display if I have to. You could use them again. I'm not going to, but you could use the bearings again. It's that nice. So it would be a crime to go and spend a lot of money to do that. And by the way, I think I mentioned that small block Chev is probably the most popular engine in the world. And the number I quoted in the past, I said I read this somewhere, obviously, or saw it on someplace. There's 100 million of them. I just saw a little bit of a video from Nick's garage. He's got one on his dyno, and he said there was 250 million of them. So I'm quoting him. I don't know which number is right. It's a lot anyway, let's put it that way. And that's why they're popular. There's more parts available for a small block Chev than any other engine. And that makes it easier to build them and less expensive. So dollar for dollar, horsepower per dollar, torque per dollar, they're a bargain and probably better than anything else. So what approach did we use? As I mentioned, I had to do a lot of cleaning. Fortunately, I have a good high pressure power washer. Spent a lot of time doing that. I have all the Moroso brushes, compressed air, and a whole bunch of other little tools to do a good thorough job of cleaning. And this one needed a lot of work. But I did that, and I'm happy that I did, and I'm satisfied that it's as clean as, and maybe it's just like the honing. It's not as nice as if the machine shop did it, but it's going to be fine. So the short block's back together, the heads are back on already, and we'd have liked to make more videos along the way, but we just, I don't always have Alec available, and I got to get things done sometimes. So what's the difference? We had an engine on the dyno a month ago or so, basically a small block. The camshaft's similar, the same heads, the same ProMaxx heads. They worked really nice. And that engine made a little over 400 horsepower. And so the difference with this one is going to be this. Almost everything about this, the camshaft, we talk about the camshaft. It's a 4/7 swap. I'm going to give you the specs on it in a minute. It's a Summit camshaft, a 4/7 swap. I haven't done one before. For those who haven't heard of that before, the firing order is 18436-572. So 4 and 7 pistons come to the top at the same time. When 4 is firing, 7 is in the overlap. When 7 is firing, 4 is in the overlap. So basically, we're reversing that. We're having 7 fire at a different time and 4 fire in its spot. So one of the things that does, the firing order wants to get 5, 7, 2. So 5 and 7 fire 90 degrees apart, and that gets the firing on the other side of the engine. That's kind of the thinking. Whether it makes any more power or not, some people claim that it does, but we're going to we dyno every engine. We're going to know that. So the one difference is it's only going to be, because I did use the original stock pistons. I have pictures of them. They look like they'd never been in an engine, and I'm not exaggerating. They were it was that nice. So the only problem with that is we're only going to have, we're going to use a Cometic, multi-layer steel gasket, and that's 26 thousandths thick. That's going to give us a quench of about 50 thousandths with 9.3 to 1 compression. That'll be fine. And that's the best we can do. You cannot use, by the way, the stainless steel gaskets that came on Chevrolet small blocks were 15 thousandths, but you can't use them with aluminum heads, unfortunately. So the Cometic gasket is the best choice. So that's going to give us 26 thou of head gasket thickness, and this engine is only going to have Once again, 9.3 to 1 compression ratio. What's the good news? You can run this thing on 87 octane. It'll run on regular fuel, no problem whatsoever, and still make lots of power. So it's going to be a nice build. I think we're pretty excited about it. So once again, what we saved in machine shop work, and you know, machine shop guys, they're not ripping anybody off. They got to make a living. They got lots of costs, okay, but it's expensive work and it adds up. So what we saved, we bought more premium parts. So let me go through the parts. We've used these heads before, ProMaxx 170cc on the previous build, and they did really good. So we did it again. We like them. And they come, whenever you buy cylinder heads, aluminum cylinder heads, make sure you're aware, there's usually always two versions, one that's made for a roller cam and one that's made for a flat tappet cam. This is a flat tappet cam. The valve springs are different. Usually the valve springs are about 1 1/4 diameter for a flat tappet cam and closer to 1.4, 1.5 for a roller cam. So that's one of the things you have to remember. But they come complete. They're also machined to accept Vortex style valve covers. So we are going to use some Vortex style valve covers. What's good about them? They do not leak. So that's one of the advantages. The second generation small block basically went to captured seals and gaskets in the entire engine. You don't need any goop. Put them together, and it's a nice example. And so we're going to put them on. Somebody wants different valve covers, we can do that as well. So let's talk about the camshaft, I guess. I've got to get the cam card. There's the cam box. It's a Summit 1202. So what's unique about that? The 4.7 swap is unique, but the numbers are pretty close to the same cam that we used for the last 350. 465 on the intake, 473 on the exhaust with a 1.5 rocker. We're going to actually use, the rocker arms are in this box. They are actually crane rocker arms. They are not brand new. I took them off another build, and actually we use these rocker arms. I had a video recently, not recently, last year, on a rocker arm test with these rocker arms, and they did pretty good. But they're 1.6 on the intake and only 1.5 on the exhaust, which is something we often do. The intake closes at 64 degrees after bottom dead center, and that helps us to contribute to getting as much compression pressure out of it as we can. The duration is advertised 278, 288, and at 50 it's 218, 228. So fairly fast ramps. Once again, the Summit cam, and maybe you have to make sure you remember, put your spark plug wires 4 and 7 got to be swapped on the distributor. So we'll be running this on the test stand and at the dyno. Not sure when yet, haven't got a date for it yet. So that's the cam, and Mike Kimball come up with that. He's always doing homework and research for me. And we always want to try something different so we can learn, and you can learn by watching. It's that basically at our expense. Lifters are GM Delphi lifters. This is kind of our go-to lifter now that we always use. And once again, cross your fingers, 0 valve lifter failures, 0 camshaft failures so far. So we're pretty happy about that. So what else we got going on for this engine? I've got new Cloy's roller chain, roller timing chain, brand new Howard's push rods. We measured the push rods. In this case, it works out with those heads. They recommend usually the standard push rod is 7.8, and ProMaxx says you're probably going to need 7.9, and I measured it 7.85. So that's what these are. The intake manifold, Performer RPM, actually a little better intake manifold than on the last one, or at least equivalent. It's a little higher. Mike has measured it. It's got a little bit higher profile. But Edelbrock, made in the USA, of course. Edelbrock Performer is a pretty well-known piece, and we expect it to work pretty good. So what else have I missed here? So I mentioned the rockers. New distributor. It's over there in the cap. This one that I use all the time, the 65,000 volt HEI drop-in distributor. And if you watch the recent video we did with my son's race engine, we did most of the pulls with that distributor, one exactly like it. In fact, it might have even been that one actually, now that I think about it. And then we installed an MSD with an MSD box, and they made almost exactly the same power. Actually, the way you measured it, the MSD made it a little bit less, but that's in the error of measuring, basically. So pretty much didn't make any difference, let's put it that way. So the other thing we're going to do, nice powder-coated oil pan. That's the Summit piece. Saved me painting it, and it's a lot nicer job than when I paint it. I do my best. We always prime it and make sure it's good and clean. One of the things bring up when we're talking about it, if you're restoring, you're doing a budget build, and you got a rusty old pan and you're tempted to sandblast it, do not do that. No matter how hard you try, some of that sanding media will get stuck in the crevices and it'll find its way into your bearings, and you'll be sorry you didn't buy a new pan by the time you're done. So one thing we don't fool around with is oil pans, and that's not an expensive piece, but it's going to look really nice. Manifold cam, I think we got all the parts covered. I'll do this build the same as every other build, detailed documentation. I already have all the documentation. I've done all the bearing clearances. Standard Clevite 77 bearings, standard size, not undersized. The numbers are right on, 2.5 plus or minus. And all the clearances are already done. Just got to do the work, get the rest of the parts on it, and get it running. We'll have it running here probably by tomorrow if I keep working at it. So hope you found that interesting. Don't forget to, once again, like and subscribe. If you enjoyed this video, help me out. If you keep subscribing, I'll be motivated to make videos, because when I'm making videos, I'm not building engines. So I gotta manage that. So tip of the day. So thought about this one a little bit. One of the things we do a lot is measure everything, and measure every bearing clearance, measure the thrust on the camshaft. Everything in the engine gets measured. In my case, gets documented, goes on an Excel spreadsheet. Once in a while, you get an outlier. What is an outlier? It's a number that it's not consistent with your expectations. So one of the things you have to be sure is if you don't get the result you want, I guess you could say keep measuring until you do get it. That's not really fair. Keep measuring until you're sure you got the right number. That's the important thing. I had an experience recently with a customer who decided on spec to check his compression, and one cylinder was a little low. He was worried about it, and we had a discussion what it could be. And so I said, why don't you just drive it? So he put the plugs back in it, took it for a ride, came back, checked it again, and the numbers are perfect. So, he could have taken that engine all apart thinking there was something wrong. Now, how do you explain how that happens? Is it the way he measured it? Was there something in the engine at the time that was throwing off the numbers? Whatever it is. And once again, I check a bearing clearance. If I'm in the 2.5 hour range and all of a sudden I got one that's 1.5, I'll check to make sure. And maybe it is, but be sure before you take action that you're making the good decisions based on solid information. That's the most important point that I'm trying to get across here. And otherwise, you could spend a lot of time and money, fix things that aren't broken, and not improve anything, and maybe make it worse. So that's the tip of the day. Hope you found that interesting. We'll do more with this engine. We'll probably the next step, we'll have it on the test stand running, and then I got to get a hold of Daryl and see if he's got a dyno date, and we'll dyno her and see who's right about the horsepower. And one thing I forgot to mention, carburetors. So we'll try to use this engine a little bit as a test mule. We're going to try my Edelbrock carburetor. We're going to bring that. Daryl's got lots of Hollies. We're going to put some quadrajets on it. I even got a Carter AFB. I'm doing a dual quad 409. They came with a Carter AFB, which an Edelbrock is really a knockoff of that. And we're even going to throw that on there and just see. They're the Edelbrock carburetors are very, very popular carburetors. They work well out of the box. You don't have to do much to them. Let's see how they compare power-wise against all the other carburetors I mentioned. Thanks for watching Gold's Garage.